Welcome to the NOAA Science Seminar, Our Submerged Past, Exploring Inundated Late Pleistocene Caves in Southeast Alaska with Sunfish. This presentation will focus on the findings derived from using the Sunfish Autonomous Underwater Vehicle, or AUV, to survey the west side of Prince of Wales Island in order to expand our understanding of the palaeoenvironment in Southeast Alaska. This seminar series is co-hosted by NOAA Ocean Exploration and the NOAA Library. My name is Nina Przinski, and I'm the Grant Science Support Coordinator working at NOAA Ocean Exploration in the Science and Technology Division, and also with the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute. So I'm really excited to introduce you to our seminar speakers today, Drs. Kristof, Richmond, and Kelly Monteleone. Dr. Richmond completed his PhD at Stanford University on a visual mapping, navigation, and control system for Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI, remotely operated vehicles, and then started working with Stone Aerospace on a variety of robotics projects. He's taken advanced, highly maneuverable underwater robotics into all kinds of places, from caves in Namibia to under the McMurdo ice shelf in Antarctica. Dr. Richmond has been involved with the development of the Sunfish AUV from its beginnings at Stone Aerospace and now continuing at the spin-out Sunfish Inc. Dr. Monteleone completed her PhD in anthropology from the University of New Mexico. She has a Master of Science in Maritime Archaeology from the University of Southampton in the UK and an Honors Bachelor of Science in Archaeology from the University of Calgary. Her research focuses on providing the tools and expertise to help locate submerged archaeological sites on the continental shelf of Southeast Alaska and assist the local communities in learning more about their ancestors. Dr. Monteleone is the Associate Director for the Canada and International Constituency for Sigma Xi and the Secretary for the Alaska Chapter of Sigma Xi. The project that they are presenting on today was supported via the NOAA Ocean Exploration Fiscal Year 2021 funding opportunity. So without further ado, I wanted to thank you both for your time today and for sharing your wonderful research with us. And with that, I will hand the floor over to you now.
So the title that Nina explained for our submerged past is for the whole talk. And Kristof and I have kind of split this into two different sections, and then I'll wrap up at the end. So I'm going to start, then you'll hear from Kristof, and you'll hear from me in a bit. The QR code on the left is for the website that NOAA's put together for the project and has some great links to things going on with the project. But the first bit of the talk is really going to be about the submerged archaeology in Southeast Alaska. And I'm up here giving the talk, but really there's a whole list of co-authors on this, including many people from Sunfish and researchers like Dr. Bigelow and Postbalova and Dr. Jason Gully. There's many people that worked on this. And so many names, not just mine. I just get to do the talking. And what am I talking about? Well, when push comes to shove, I'm talking about how people came to the New World, and it's a complicated event, and it was most likely in multiple phases. And so we always talk about how did people get to the Americas, and most of our ancestors, as European descendants, used a transatlantic crossing. The North Atlantic crossing has some contention, but likely did happen also. Trans-Pacific crossing, we have many evidences for, especially down in South America. But the one we all got taught in school was actually walking across the Bering Land Bridge and down the ice-free corridor. So this one here. Can you guys see the laser pointer? But the route that I'm looking at is actually the coastal migration route. This route would have been open during around the end of the last glacial maximum, if not a little earlier. To answer these questions, I've been specifically looking at the northern northwest coast. So it's the Alexander Archipelago and specifically Prince of Wales Island. And if we focus in on Prince of Wales Island, there's a couple different spots that'll come up in our conversations. Shukaka Cave, formerly On Your Knees Cave, up on the north end of Prince of Wales Island. Chican Bay, where we'll talk about some of the stuff we found. To a large extent, what we're going to talk about is really going to focus on this little area just south of the town of Craig called Ladrone Islands. When we're looking at this, though, we got to look at sea level because we're talking about a massive sea level change in this region, about 165 meters of sea level change. 166 meter terrace that could have been either 13,000 where at the end of the last glacial maximum, maybe 17,000. This figure is based on Bechtel and his colleagues' 2021 paper. The region would have been deglaciated by 14 or 15,000 years ago, and that last glacial maximum that globally was up around 21,000 years ago, locally was more 19,800 to 17,000 years ago. So we got a lot of data up here, but what we're lacking is data points down here. You can see how this is a very disjointed curve, and most of the information is actually labeled throughout this red line that is Southeast Alaska. For comparison, then, I've included the northern half of Haida Gwaii, Graham Island, and you can see that it mirrors it pretty closely. So we think it's still a reasonable suggestion for a sea level curve. But one of our goals is always to add more data to that sea level reconstruction. So let's talk about the Northwest Coast. Where and when are people showing up? Everything you're seeing on this map are sites that are older than 10,500 calendar years ago. And that's pretty and all. I want to point out where Triquet Island is down here, but it's better to read it in a table, I find. The one I want to point out first is 11,100 years ago. Shakan Utsi is a fish trap that we found during this project, and that date is based on the sea level reconstruction. It is changing as we refine the sea level, but it's at least 11,000 years old, which makes it, as far as I can tell, the oldest dated fish trap. I think a lot of the fish traps around the world are extensively older, but being able to date it by the sea level reconstruction, I think, might give it that unique classification. I want to point out Triquet Island, which actually ends up being the oldest at 13,850 years ago. So we're not pushing back that far into the Pleistocene yet. And part of that is the where the sea levels are. Triquet Island has a very different sea level curve than Southeast Alaska. So, not nearly enough background. I would love to spend an hour and a half telling you all about why we're looking in this area and stuff like that. But let's move into this project and know that there's other presentations and other places to find more of the background. This Submerged Past project came about for a couple different reasons, but one of the main things was that we know that on the main islands of Prince of Wales and the region, they have some amazing caves above water where they've found great paleontological and archaeological information. So the top left figure is Shukaka Cave, and then El Capitan Cave is a cave you can actually go visit. There's a lot more caves, but some of them aren't available to the public knowledge. So if all of that exists on the terrestrial area, and we know the sea level was significantly lower, I kind of wonder, and we all kind of wonder, what about caves underwater? And that's where this started to go. But this is a huge area. So I started off creating models to identify areas of high potential. And as many of you may know, finding maps of geology for underwater is not the easiest thing to do. And so some of this is it's mainly based on the terrestrial geology. This first one is a weighted overlay where I've taken the different variables, and this is more of an extension on the work I did in my dissertation and my postdoc. I then have expanded out to a random forest model, which has very similar results, but has smaller areas of high potential. And finally, I used maximum entropy or MaxEnt model. And again, we're seeing very similar results, but this one actually produced more potential in a lot of places. And then after spending months working on that, the retired Forest Service geologist gave me the karst layer he had created, sat down with me and drew out where he wanted me to go. To a large extent, it matches with my models, but that karst layer that you see in yellow would have been very useful, and thus the models need a little bit more time put into them now that that data layer exists. So in 2022, I took a team out for the first year of our Submerged Past project. We did 19 survey days in a 21-day field season, which is absolutely amazing considering the weather in Southeast Alaska. We were able to go to 21 different locations, which you can see on the map, but I'm going to go back one. We collected 18 and a half hours of ROV using the Sea Drone Inspector 3, you can see in the bottom left, and 540 square kilometers of side scan sonar, and we were using the EdgeTech 4125 with a dual frequency of 400 and 900 kilohertz. So we kind of went all over our study area. And you can see I made the study area really large. Everyone keeps telling me I need to get out to Coronation Island, and then getting out there becomes this interesting idea that isn't necessarily accessible. We had a really productive year, but what did we actually find? Well, the fun answer is we found a rifle on the seafloor up in Chican Bay. And no, I know nothing about rifles, so I can't tell you anything else. Back in 2010, when I was working on my dissertation research in this area, up in Chican Bay, I had identified sonar imagery for what I thought was a fish trap. And I've presented this in numerous places, including the side scan imagery. And I've heard back from a lot of experts who really thought it was a fish trap. When we went to go confirm it in 2012, we had the wrong location. Because the side scan was towed behind the boat, I was told originally that everything was corrected with the GPS locations, and then a couple years later was told that I needed to correct the location for the leg. So when I did that, we went back out in 2022 when we had no side scan working, and we dropped the ROV down, and I was able to find the fish trap almost instantly. Now, I know a lot of you are basically seeing particulate matter in water. And so let me try to draw this out for you. So I've sketched some of what I see as rocks or boulders. They're about 10 to 30 centimeters in size. So about the right size for a stonefish trap. If I take away the background, you can see stacking pattern and that they form a rough semicircular feature, which was much clearer in the side scan. So this has been submitted to the archaeological branch and has a site name, and the elders, the Council of Traditional Scholars here at Sealaska Heritage Institute named it Sikan Uti, meaning rock pile or fish trap of Chican Bay. So that was kind of exciting. We finally confirmed the fish trap I'd been looking for more than a decade. What else did we get? Well, lots and lots of marks on the side scan. Now, some of these marks on the side scan really are just us putting, markers in for things we see to look at in the future. And so we had 995 locations marked and subsequently reviewed these down. Each of these was then recorded, described, and mapped. And some of these marks ended up being like low potential. Were really more placeholders for interesting things like a cable in the water or an example of a group of fish, examples of things I was seeing in the sonar so I could find the imagery again if needed. So the initial pass through the data refined it down to 99 potential cave locations and 116 potential archaeological locations. And some of these locations were actually the exact same place, but on a second pass. So based on the initial review, 88 areas of interest for caves or openings were identified within the year one survey area. And these locations combined several points together, incorporating things like distance from archaeologically identified sites, the potential ones that I'd identified and known archaeological sites, and also things like whether it's even feasible for us to get there, things like current and depth. So based on that, I was able to refine the areas down and rank them, and we had 88 areas of interest to go back to. And based on the probabilities of these areas was how we developed our work plan. So a couple examples of some of the side scans that I was seeing. The top image, you can see some very steep landforms here that could potentially have caves that we didn't see as we went past. And I believe this is the same landform here. No, that doesn't make sense, or else we'd have the mark there. So similar type of landform here, and you can see it comes up to a head. So that was intriguing to me. We got a nice cliff face here with some interesting features, and then some shadows over here. And then some potential shell middens where I have raised features, often with rocky outcrops and a density change. So that takes us to 2023, our second year as a field survey, when Sunfish came out also. And in 2023, we had diver survey, Sunfish doing surveys and mapping of caves, and sediment sample collection. And at that point, I'm going to pass it off to Kristof.
So yeah, in 2023 then, we joined Kelly and rest of our field deployment team and did another deployment based on that initial survey that was done in 2022 in the first year of the project. And this time we took along our highly maneuverable underwater vehicle that's been developed over the last about 15 years at Sunfish. And just to give everybody a little idea of kind of where we're coming from and how we became a possible candidate for looking at submerged sites in Southeast Alaska. We started off with Stone Aerospace and did a lot of work actually looking at submerged caves in Florida and in Mexico, and did a lot of mapping with divers. Proceeded on to incorporate that into more robotic vehicles and got some funding from NASA, who was interested in, if you wanted to go to an extraterrestrial body, like say the Europa, where we just launched the Europa Clipper to go and explore and see what the sub-ice ocean might be there. If we eventually wanted to send a robot there, what kind of technologies would we need? And so we started developing navigation, autonomous capabilities, autonomous exploration capabilities in those kind of environments for NASA. And along the way, we put together a small, portable, highly maneuverable vehicle with, the smarts to go explore by itself, and spin out this company, SUNFISH, to develop that. And that's kind of where we met up with Kelly, who was interested in going places nobody's gone before under the ocean, to find, places that we have been as a species, tens of thousands of years ago, but that are now no longer accessible to us. And so that's where SUNFISH came in. SUNFISH is an autonomous underwater vehicle. It's highly maneuverable, can control itself in all 6 degrees of freedom, can translate, hover like a helicopter, can spin in all directions. It's lightweight enough to be person portable, but has some advanced navigation and autonomy features. So we do have a 3-dimensional simultaneous localization and mapping system. That's the SLAM, based on multi-beam sonar. The vehicle is able to explore by itself to find its way in an unknown environment, and avoid obstacles, and make sure that you've come back with sonar or visual map of where the vehicle has been. Some more of the more detailed specs, if you're interested. It's about 5 feet long, and can be carried by 2 people. The vehicle can get down to about 200 meters depth, a little over 600 feet. And this wasn't true when we went out in 2023, but we've upgraded the battery recently and have about a 12-kilometer range now for standard kind of mapping operations. And for the people who are interested in some of the more technical details of what's on board, the top 5 sensors here are kind of our standard suite of sensors. Has a high precision gyroscope and inertial measurement unit, Doppler velocity log, sonar multi-beam, and we can get conductivity, temperature, and depth. And we also have a forward-looking video camera with lights. And then we have a selection of fancier payloads, which we did not take along to Alaska. And in fact, some of these are new since we went on that expedition. So what you see in this picture are some strobes for mapping a cave, where we have high resolution stereo cameras with strobed flashes to get really great pictures. We have a GNSS system or GPS, if you're working somewhere where you do actually see the sky, to initialize the location of the vehicle, and you can get a map then. Once you're underwater, of course, you don't get the GPS anymore, but you can at least relate your map to that initial starting position at the surface. And we've added the ability to actually get discrete water samples and measured nitrates, as well as specialized payloads. And then the important part about SUNFISH is how we operate it on kind of what we call a spectrum of autonomy. So it can work completely autonomously, like I was saying, where you give it a goal to go explore an area and it figures out how to move and come back with a map in that area. You can give it waypoints in a script and tell it, we want you to follow this trajectory or go to these points. And both of those can also be operated in a supervised manner where we have a fiber optic communications tether to give you high bandwidth communications and kind of look over the shoulder of the vehicle as it's operating, and be able to intervene. If you see something you want to divert the vehicle towards, or if there's a particularly delicate operation that you need to watch over. And then, using that fiber, of course, we can also do kind of remotely operated operations at the servo level and operate it like a remotely operated vehicle if necessary. Like I said, SUNFISH is a highly maneuverable vehicle. We like to say it hovers like a helicopter, flies like a jet fighter. This is a little bit sped up vehicle, but this is in our test tank out in Austin, Texas. And you can see how, if you have a sensor on the vehicle, you can aim it any place you need to go. We use that maneuverability to do different kinds of maneuvers. You'll see this kind of scanning in a lot of the videos coming up, where the vehicle is actually rotating to get a picture of everything around it. So based on those kind of capabilities, we built up then the behaviors to do more advanced autonomous capabilities. So here the vehicle is actual moving through a cave. This is a simulated situation where it's scanning around, mapping out the area around it, and deciding what a safe area is to go in. And this is then the kind of real natural cave that we've mapped out previously. This is actually a location in Florida where we had a long conduit that we could go and explore. And then as alongside this project, we wanted to be able to explore caves, potentially go to sites and be able to say, hey, we saw something interesting inside a cave. Let's go back to that. So, the vehicle is able to map out. This is a simulated scenario here on our vehicle simulator. The vehicle is mapping out, some complicated labyrinthine environment. And you can see the white dots are locations where we say, hey, this would be an interesting place to go towards. And then we can give it a location in the map and have it return to some place that it's seen before. So that's what that last little bit was showing. So it's actually not referencing any kind of GPS coordinates, but it's using the map that it's built up to say, hey, I want to go back to this place in the map. And then we also, for this project, added the capability to do a little bit of sediment sampling. We're inspired by Kelly's comment, like, hey, if we're in a cave, I know you can't carry a lot of sediment with that vehicle, but might as well get something. So we put a little suction sampler together and just had it be actuated by pushing into sediment. So using the maneuverability of the vehicle to aim that and push it into the sediment and get a little bit of sediment back if possible. So with all those capabilities, in June of last year, we headed out again to Prince of Wales Island with the goal of actually finding, mapping, and sampling those possible caves and rock shelters that were identified in the first year, and looking for evidence of prehistoric life, prehistoric human habitation. So specifically, SUNFISH, we wanted to be able to map and confirm targets from that initial survey, take back and bring back images and be able to identify sediments, and then go back with a dive team, potentially with long sediment cores that the vehicle would not be able to carry, and get good sediment samples in areas that had been identified as targets from that mapping. So we spent about a little over 2 weeks in the field, about 15 days, I think it was. Not every day was quite as beautiful as you see here on the left, but you can see how SUNFISH we were able to deploy from a small, fishing vessel of opportunity, essentially, with a small, command station inside the cabin of the boat. You see me over there on the right, operating the vehicle. This was a little more typical of a lot of the days that we had out, but we did operate mostly in a supervised mode, with Sunfish having a fiber tether attached, so that if we did find any kind of interesting target, cave, or something that we wanted to identify, we'd be immediately able to go there and verify whether it was something that merited further investigation. And then we also had a dive team along, Dr. Jason Gully and his diving partner Tamara Adame came out there. Highly experienced cave divers on rebreather equipment, and they're science divers that were able to then provide some of the sampling capability. Obviously on a much shorter time scale than in those 40-degree waters. Divers aren't going to be able to stay in as long as our robot. So use the robot to go find the spot, target it, and then have the divers be able to go and just do the sampling operation. And we spent some nice rainy days in Southeast Alaska. It was a little bit unseasonably bad weather, which kind of restricted a lot of the places that we could go. But we also got some great days, just enjoying the marvelous nature in that part of the world. Great craggy rocks that you're sure somebody wanted to live in those caves at some point. And beautiful sunrises, heading out to sea. And we brought back data. So these are some of the raw point clouds that were then created from the multi-beam data, the multi-beam sensor on Sunfish. It's a little hard, I guess, to see. The perspective kind of varies in these different clouds, but if you can see my cursor on the upper right here, we're kind of looking sideways at a cliff, and you can see an overhang on the side of this slope. Over here on the top left, it's a little bit more of an overhead view of a large area that we mapped out, and actually found some interesting overhangs in these gullies. On the bottom right is another cliffside that we looked at, and on the bottom left, and on the bottom right is a large area where we scanned another cliffside. And overall, we did 33 dives at 22 different sites, and got a good amount, a couple of square kilometers of very high resolution, three-dimensional mapping data in these point clouds. And in some places, so we were able to explore a cave called Sealaska Cave that was known in the area. And Sunfish was able, this is a little hard to see as well, but you can tell that Sunfish has gone through behind this point cloud, through a tunnel, and come out on the other side. You'll see this later in some of the other pictures where we've actually, from this raw point cloud data, been able to create a 3D map. So we also demonstrated Sunfish's abilities to explore these kind of complicated terrains. So then, taking those point clouds, we create what's called a mesh. So you actually get a smooth surface out of all those points. This is an example of one of those gullies, finding a kind of overhang rock shelter. And this is that Sealaska Cave that I showed the point cloud of just 2 slides ago. So being able to map out the 3D geometry of that area, and this went from about 50 centimeter resolution up to about at the highest we got about a 5 centimeter resolution when we were up close inside the cave. We did run into some interesting issues, and actually developed some new insights into how to work with robots and humans together. In particular, so we did these 3D maps and found sites where we thought, hey, we want to get some samples of the sediment in those areas. But how do you communicate that between the robot's map and what a diver is going to do? So, for example, we went to this site where you see the intended location was this large overhang of rock with some soft sediment on the bottom that we wanted to sample. We kind of, told the divers, okay, there's a crack on the right, and if you go down from the surface, you should be able to find that and follow the slope down to the intended location. But I'm sure, as anybody knows who's actually, been diving in cold, in poor visibility, being able to find something like that is going to be very difficult for a human diver. And after they came up with a sediment sample, and we talked a little bit about what it looked like, we realized that the actual sampling location where we got that sediment sample from was probably, it doesn't even show up on this as a ledge, but a small ledge, within the 50 centimeter resolution of this map. That was not actually the intended location. So after that, we decided to use SUNFISH as a diver assistant, and it's able to, in its map with the sonar, have much better visibility of what's around, and be able to guide the divers then on location. So on the left, you have a site that you want to sample in the three-dimensional map that the vehicle has created. We deployed SUNFISH back, had it localize itself in that map, and drive to the site with the divers following. And then it could hover there and monitor their progress. We could get video of what was going on and actually document the location and precise sampling procedures. And then at the end, we did also manage to test out the sediment sampling capabilities of SUNFISH itself. So picking a spot on this sandy floor in the cave, and SUNFISH is able to orient its sampler there and drive it into the bottom to create a small sediment sample. Certainly not the 30-inch cores that you really need to be able to guarantee a historical record. But if you're going someplace where nobody else can, you might as well bring something back. So overall, a great success of being able to find, localize sites and get actual scientific data back from them. And as Kelly said, we had a great team along on the trip, and in particular, thank the people of Southeast Alaska for their involvement and support of this project. So I'll hand it back over to Kelly and to talk more about what we did then with those samples that we got.
I'm going to now talk to you about what we got from those sediment cores. So what you're seeing here in the background is Mimi, one of SUNFISH's staff, helping us split one of our cores. And we did PVC pipes, 3-inch pipe, and they were at least 30 centimeters long, and they were at least 3 feet long. But because the pipes come in such lengths, when Mimi cut them for our lengths to go in, they're a little longer than that, which means we could have longer samples. Amazing assistance from Mimi through all of that. Part of the reason why I need to not be on the screen is so you can actually see the bottom right corner, because as Kristof was mentioning, we had some of the worst weather. Our ship captain, Roby Mendina, who is from Kawak, and runs a fishing charter from there, indigenous from Kawak. And he says this is one of the worst seasons he'd ever had. So we didn't get to do much outside of this lovely little protected area near Craig and Kawak. But we were able to collect 4 different cores, 3 down in the Ladrone Islands and 1 off San Fernando. And as you saw from Kristof's thing, the core 2 is not where we wanted it, but it's still an interesting core. And then we also have 2 more odd samples. So in the back of the cave, there was not enough sediment to take an actual sample. And so our dive team collected a Ziploc bag of sample from the back of the cave, plus that sample from SUNFISH that you saw Kristof driving around taking that sample. So what were we looking for? Well, lots of really, really small things is the quick answer. But we were looking at pollen. So that's from different plants. And that was all done by Dr. Nancy Bigelow from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And then dinoflagellate cysts. And Dr. Vera Pospalova from the University of Minnesota was doing those. And dinoflagellates are single-celled organisms and one of the main groups of phytoplankton responsible for primary productivity in the ocean. So we can learn a lot about the environment from those two. But I also want to learn about people. I'm not saying anything on this slide is microdebitage, just so you know. But microdebitage then is little flakes that come off when someone is using or making a stone tool. And, the scale on here is in millimeters each bar. And we're talking about really, really small bits of stone. One of the fun things about doing this with a cave is you also have to make sure it's not from the surface of the cave. And I've been having some great discussions with other researchers in the area, and we've been talking about how obsidian is so ubiquitous throughout Southeast Alaska that just having the presence of obsidian is not enough to make it an archaeological site because it'll naturally occur in some of these areas. So this microdebitage analysis, I'm actually working with Dr. Lisa Sonnenberg, who's at Lakehead University in Parks, Canada. And she's the one who started doing this in cores back in the Great Lakes, back in mainland area. And so she's been helping me through this process, and we check in on a lot of this stuff. She's also a geoarchaeologist. So those 4 cores, nice sediment profiles. The main core we've been focusing on is core 3. As you can see, it was nice and long. It was 64 centimeters long. And I have radiocarbon dates and calibration dates. And the calibrations use both Bcron and R-Bacon to do the analysis. The numbers you're seeing there are from the Bcron analysis. They work out to be the same numbers. And we are using a marine correction with a delta R from Schumacher et al. 2021 within those models. Okay, what's interesting here? What's going on? Well, I like to point out that we have an almost 12,000 year calibrated date here on core 3. One of the reasons why we were focusing on core 3 was that, whereas the other cores only end up going back about 2,000, 2,500 years. Let's first go to Sea Lion Cave. You've seen a bit of this from Kristof, and I absolutely love this video. I am so sorry about the text in the middle of the screen. It was supposed to be attached to another thing, and it wasn't grouped properly. But this is a video by by Tamara Dame of Jason Gully swimming around inside the cave. And you can see the opening and things like that, but it's an interesting cave. There is an archaeological site nearby, and so we know that people were in this area, and people were also using caves right here too. I'm tempted to leave this on for a moment so you guys can enjoy it. But I have a lot to say. So, again, I apologize, that text will stay there. But I was looking at the microdebitage, and then that baggie from the back of the cave, I found a couple things that are looking suspiciously like they could actually be flaked materials. This looks like it could be a quartz type material, and you can see some feathering on some of these. And we're using standard lithic analysis, and that's what the text is actually associated with. So the sunfish sample, got a nice clear piece here, and a lot of these ones are really questionable. And they're also really small. Those little black bars are 1 millimeter. And so I've enlarged them to make them visible here. But you can kind of see some interesting scarring on some of these. Now, to finalize the discussion on microdebitage, I need to get access to a scanning electron microscope. And Sealaska Heritage Institute is in the process of opening our Indigenous Science building. And that is going to include a scanning electron microscope. So I'm hopeful to be able to look at these under a scanning electron microscope really soon. These ones are from core 1, which is from just in front of the cave. And you can see some really nice feathering here and possibly a platform here. And some flake scars from here. Now, some of these things can occur naturally in individual cases, but the quantity of potential flakes here means that it's a very high probability that people were using this cave and that this area was an archaeological site. We also have pollen. The cave is at 20 meters deep, which means it would have been inundated 11,000 years ago. Sorry, going back to my notes. Okay, so first we have dinoflagellate cysts. And bear with me because I am literally reading notes that were given to me by those experts because these are not my areas. But for the dinoflagellate, we have overall the sediment samples from this core 1 suggest dynamic environment with periods of high productivity, likely driven by varying nutrient levels and possibly changing light conditions. There's an increase in the autotrophic to the heterotrophic ratio towards the top of the core, indicating a shift towards different conditions. And then the pollen, which, taking how this looks, because I'm going to show you one that's a lot more complicated. We only analyzed from 5 to 10. Oh, I didn't tell you the fun part of core 1. It was our first core number 1. I had arrows pointing on which way was up. Up went in, down. So when I got the core, I put it up. Well, we mixed that core very well, this nice 15 centimeter core. So really any sample from here is a single sample. With the pollen, it was dominated by hemlock, followed by spruce, alder, and pine. How did Sea Lion Cave get its name? The location is actually used by local diving community today. And I reached out to retired Forest Service archaeologist Terry Fifield when I found out about a nearby cave site that he had recorded in the archaeological database. And before his time, which was in the late 90s, someone had actually found a bone in the cave that was assumed to be a sea lion, and nobody had verified that. So he told me the name of the cave was Sea Lion Cave. Now, the divers we were working with hadn't actually heard that name before. So it's one of these things where community knowledge is often hit or miss like that. The other really exciting site was the Ladrones overhang. So technically there's core 3, which is what we're looking at here, and core 4 from this location. Now, core 3, as I said, is a really nice core. It goes way back in time. There's my 12,000 mark and our 10,700 cal BP at the bottom. Vera, with her dinoflagellate cyst analysis, used some analysis to break this into zones. And I'll talk more about the zones in a bit. But we have a little bit of contention as to where this one goes. But you can see the sediment, whether 55 centimeters goes in zone 2 or zone 1. But you can see with the sediment types, based on the color scheme, that zone 1 really breaks at 55 centimeters, and that fits with the ages. So this is where you saw with Kristof's picture, where the divers had sunfish helping them take the cores. It was really fun because Jason went down with his sediment sample. We had sunfish watching him, and he hammers this core in, and you could just see his body language change. He was so excited. And he comes up and he goes, "Give me another one. I want to do it again." And goes down and takes core 4. It's just around the corner from Sea Lion Cave. And interestingly, the surface sample, because for dinoflagellate cysts, we always would take a sample of water just above where they were taking the core sample. Their cyst includes a harmful algae bloom causing species found, and most likely indicates the cyst preservation issue known for this species. So it's the Alexandrium species is found in there. There's some interesting mixing with those radiocarbon dates. I'm pretty sure most of you are scratching your head going, what on earth is going on there? And you wonder why I've been working with a geoarchaeologist. We are having fun trying to explain all of this. So mixing of the sediments, one of the main things I think is going on here is a wave height issue. So this location is, I don't have a note, but it's about, there it is, 21 meters below modern sea level. And based on calculations I did more than a decade ago with average wave heights, the wave action affects down to 38 meters. So this location for thousands of years has been within the wave base. And at any point when water was above this, it would have been within the wave base because it would have been shallower. So there's a mixing happening at all times of the top sediments. The Dr. Bigelow, who was doing the pollen, also pointed out that would also have been other species mixing the surface sediments too. So we had worked in 5 centimeter samples, and it would be a mix no matter which way you look at it. The bottom of the core and the middle of the core, though, are zone 3. So zone 1 and zone 3 have microdebitage, and this is where the zones kind of break a little bit differently. Now, this is my first pass through the microdebitage. I've been refining it, and unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that yet. But let's talk about that 12,000 years as a potential date. There's been some modification to the sea level curve from when I made these figures, so bear with me that I've cut off the dates at the top. But 12,000 years ago works out to roughly 145 meters below sea level. I have this one. And where we're looking is in the middle of the screen at 141 meters. So this is what the area could have looked like. And the Ladrone Islands then would have been, landlocked at that point. It would have been marshy and things like that. With the dinoflagellates, we have the first finding of, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Hindocynthia mustoke outside of the estuarine waters of neighboring British Columbia. The pollen at this lowest level, or what we were calling zone 1, is dominated by spruce and alder, as well as some fern spores. Hemlock is rare, and the pine family is increasing throughout it. Spruce needles and Panaceae seedwing fragments are present, and this fits with the existing pollen chronologies for the area. I wish I had like hours to talk more about this. But it looks like this area, especially at the bottom of the core, and again, we're looking right about here-ish, would have been a nearshore environment. So, yes, I do not expect you to be able to read this diagram. I don't care how big your screen is. When you're giving a talk, it's always a lot. This is the pollen diagram. So we have calibrated ages, we have the depth, and then these are percents of the species. And she has her zones here, and just note that her zone 1 to break is a little earlier than what Dr. Pospalova and I have been doing. So let's talk about that middle zone, zone 2. Now we're seeing both western hemlock and mountain hemlock increasing, and a reduction in alder pollen and fern spores. Panacea stomata concentrations peak in the middle half of the zone before decreasing to near the top. There's no terrestrial plant macrofossils in this phase. On the top zone, it's a slight decrease in western hemlock, along with an increase in pine and alder pollen. Panacea stomata concentrations increase from the base of the zone, reaching a maximum value at the 25 to 30 centimeter. With the dinoflagellate cysts, a total of 29 dinoflagellate cyst taxa were identified, 10 autotrophic and 19 heterotrophic species. This diagram shows the relative abundance of the individual species, and again, I know it is a lot. But the 4 that are underlined actually constitute 95% of the cyst taxa present, with their relative abundances, which means less than 5% of them are other species. And we see a change in these species from about 41 to 68%, averaging at about 55% for the cores. This is one I'm still learning how to understand a bit more, but this is the down core changes in the dinoflagellate cyst concentrations and relative abundance of total autotrophic versus heterotrophic taxa, including principal component analysis as 1 and 2 scores for them. So let me get to the gist of this core 3. Zone 1, that deepest area, we're talking about active upwelling and the highest primary productivity, likely some instability in the system. Zone 2 then is a weakening of the upwelling intensity or duration, warmer sea surface temperatures, and lower primary productivity. And then zone 3 is the gradual coastal upwelling intensifies and increases in primary productivity, possibly some cooling. So before I go to the next steps, the last point to make is all the sediments we have are marine. We have some indications that the bottom of the core might be marshy, but we are not talking about terrestrial sediments with any of the core samples we got. What's next? I've got to finish writing this up. We're getting really close. The stuff from the dinoflagellate cyst literally is coming in today. I got an early draft so I could provide that information to you guys. And then I've applied for a NOAA OER 2025 to go out because one of the things we found was a whole bunch of potential archaeological sites with that side scan, both with our year 1 field survey and with surveys I did with the Gateway to the Americas projects funded by NSF during my PhD and postdoc. And so I want to go out and test some of these landforms we've identified. And I've got a great team together, and fingers are crossed for that one. Gunesh Chish, thank you guys for your time. And I can't forget to list all of these great people. And that is the end for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really great to hear about. Audience, we have time to answer your questions. If you could please type them in the Q&A chat, which is a tab located on the right side of the screen, I will upload them for our speakers to answer. Remember, your first name will show up on screen with your question, but you can choose to ask questions anonymously if you would like. Can sunfish drop off beacons to direct the divers?
Yeah, I guess that's for me. So right now we do not have the capability to drop off beacons, but that's definitely, if we're looking at increasing the amount of work that we do with divers, that definitely would be something that we could consider. And there are, fairly self-contained acoustic pingers that you can drop off at sites if you want to mark them for a period of time until the battery runs out, I guess. And then I guess the question is always, do you recover them, and how do you recover them, if so? But yeah, that would be an interesting idea to pursue.
All right, next question. Does sunfish require any specific processing programs?
Yeah, so we actually, because we kind of do some non-standard data gathering in terms of, usually when you have multi-beam sonar, it's on a vessel or sometimes a autonomous underwater survey vehicle, and it's pointing down and just kind of mowing the lawn over the seafloor. But we're actually, doing these complicated maneuvers and looking up and to the side and all around. Standard, multi-beam processing software doesn't really work for our vehicle. So we've developed our own in-house processing system for doing fully three-dimensional reconstructions of environments, and we can actually fuse the sonar data, and if you have camera data, if there's enough visibility, to get a complete 3D model of the place that you've mapped with Sunfish, or with other vehicles as well. We've used it on other vehicle data as well.
Can you explain how the AUV imagery is georeferenced?
Yes. So for this project, the AUV data is actually not georeferenced, or not very well georeferenced. We did have a GPS on the boat that we used to kind of mark the sites. But when we did this project, we did not have a GPS on the robot. And so, the kind of error bars on where the robot is relative to any GPS coordinates was pretty big. Since doing this project, we've actually incorporated GPS on the robot. And so now at the surface, you can get high precision. We actually have an RTK GPS system. So if you have a surface antenna that you can reference to, you can get about centimeter level accuracy, get real high precision on where the vehicle starts off at the surface. And then as it goes down, we use gyroscopes. We use this Doppler velocity log to do what we call a dead reckoned navigation solution. Just where you're pointing and how fast you're going, and add that up, the vehicle can get a navigation estimate. And if it's doing sonar mapping, we can also use the SLAM, the simultaneous localization and mapping, to update the vehicle position. So with all that together, we can get, depending on how far you go, less than 1% of the distance traveled error buildup. So depending on how georeferenced you want to be, you might need to come up to the surface a couple more times if you want to be really precise. But that's kind of where the navigation of Sunfish is right now.
Very interesting work. Are you taking applications for scientific divers to join your crew?
I don't know, I'll let Kelly answer that one.
I'm not currently, but it's an interesting category. But there's a lot of divers up in Southeast Alaska, and so I usually try to work with the local communities when possible to find qualified people. But maybe Kristof is at some point. But I think that would be a posted job.
Yeah, I mean, we like to have our robot do as much work as possible. But definitely, if there's if there's places like here where you need scientific divers, we're always interested in finding capable people.
How do you recommend handling core samples after they come up from the water?
So what we learned was we needed to be really, really good communicating with the divers bringing the core up. And so we learned that first core, the arrows weren't very clear and they didn't really realize which way it was. And so every time we handed the core sample to them, once they were in like the coring tube to them, after that, we made sure they knew exactly which way was up, and they confirmed it when they came back up with it. When they pull the core out of the sediment, they've already capped the top, they capped the bottom. We always lose a little bit of sediment. But when it came to the surface, we did our best to keep it upright, which on a moving boat can be tricky. So that may have caused a little bit of mixing. I never think about that one. But then I drill a hole in the bottom to drain out the water before we do anything else. We let it drain for a bit before Mimi would slice it. And I'm hearing from people as we're talking about doing vibrocores that hanging things upright and letting the water and letting everything settle is really a key process. There are much more experienced people that can be answering that than me, though.
And then from Frank, I came in late. Can you tie your relative maps to real-world coordinate system?
Yeah, that's a real important question. And so for the work that we did in Alaska, we didn't have a great GPS, a great way to incorporate GPS that gives you a georeferenced coordinate system. If we have that, then yes, you can tie the maps in. And since we did the work in Alaska, that's an important capability that we need for the robot. So we have definitely worked on making that a much more seamless and more precise process.
To clarify, I do actually have the origin point, and at some point with the right computer skills, we can post-process that data to be real world associated. It's just outside the scope of my programming skills lately.
Super interesting research. You mentioned that one of your locations was located near a nearshore archaeological site. Are you planning on talking to more people on POW to potential inform future research locations?
Yes, I love talking to people on POW. And if you are actually an anonymous person on POW, please reach out to me. I love talking to all of you. I should be down there for another project doing other things, black seaweed, this winter, and I'm hoping to be able to talk to more people. And we have a proposal we're talking about that we'd be submitting in a year to actually build on the work that Ashley Lemke and John O'Shea have done, where they've actually done a virtual reality model of the landscape so that people can engage with it and understand it more. We're always trying to work near known archaeological sites because we find there is a proximity thing where we find one, we'll find more.
Did you process the sediment sample that Sunfish took?
Yes, you saw a little bit of microdebitage, but for the pollen and the dinoflagellate cysts, they really wanted samples that were radiocarbon, associated with radiocarbon dates. And as the sunfish sample was just the first couple, just the little surface scrape, we weren't carbon dating that because it was mixed surface sediment. But that was that big long strip of potential microdebitage and little rocks that I included. So I have analyzed it for microdebitage. I did classify it and characterize the sediments and things like that. But no, it didn't go for radiocarbon, pollen, or dinoflagellate cysts.
All right. Thank you so much for your answers to those questions. Nina, do you have any last comments?
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank you both again for sharing your research with us today. And also thank you for facilitating, Cassandra. I wanted to thank the audience for all of their questions. It was very clear that this was a very interesting seminar. I wanted to quickly add that the next NOAA Ocean Exploration Seminar co-hosted with the NOAA Library will be on November 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and will feature Dr. Andrew Pietruska, who will discuss his work on the deepwater AUV surveys of World War II U.S. cultural assets in the Saipan Channel. So please make sure to mark your calendars, and I'll be sending out more information shortly. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.